Hey, you're going to watch an interview now with me and Christian Montoya, who's a product manager at the MetaMask Snaps team. They're doing amazing stuff, like effectively creating or giving you the ability to build extensions for MetaMask the same way you can build extensions for your browser, which is amazingly powerful. Really, you just think about it. But we also talk about it, of course. You can actually see Christian's website right here, and you can see he is a very, very prolific builder. This is one thing that I love about him. He just builds a ton of stuff, and he has built a ton of stuff across the year, including Draw Something, which we talk about in the interview, and we talk about a lot of crazy cool stuff in the interview. But really, one thing which really was awesome for me, and I really loved to hear from Christian, was just the love for building products, the love for, at the end of the day or the end of the cycle or of the quarter, whenever you're done with your work, you now see something that is left in the world that now exists, that people use and they like using. I think that is, well, a huge dopamine hit, but also if you can get addicted to that, it's really powerful, and you end up obviously creating a lot of impact and value in the world, which to some degree you get rewarded for that. And I think that's a good philosophy to have, and it's just good stuff to do. And we talk a lot about that as well, among other topics in the interview. And I hope you have a great watch here. And go. I guess the first question which I want to ask you is not necessarily. I usually ask people about how they started their career. With you, I'm more interested in how you started at MetaMask, how you joined, and what did you join as? How did you like it initially? What was the process? Everything, all that story.
Sure. So this is a bit of a personal story. So if you don't mind me, this might be a long answer. So I had gotten involved in Ethereum in late 2016 because I had learned about it at like a lunch and learn at BetaWorks, which was a startup incubator. It's still around. And these colleagues of mine had done this presentation about Ethereum and how it was programmable. And I had dabbled a bit in Bitcoin before, but this idea of a programmable blockchain was like so exciting to me that like that same day I went home and the first thing I did was I went and bought some Ethereum on Coinbase. Not a lot. That's why not retired, but I bought a little bit. And I got really into it. I did, all kinds of stuff, became like a degenerate trader and like, was a anonymous Twitter account shilling, tokens and stuff like that for a while. I did NFTs and everything. But I had said like I would never go to a a crypto conference, and I don't think I would ever get a job in the space. Like I was just one of those like acting like I was too cool for all of that.
Oh yeah.
And um, before I was at MetaMask, I was actually working in medical AI, and it was really cool. I mean, it was something that was like super interesting to me. I was surrounded by PhDs. I was like way out of my element, and I was working on these like super upstream, like almost like research projects, and I was hitting this wall because the projects I was working on, they just weren't going to production. So I really wanted to work on something that was in the market, and I wasn't getting there. And after like 4 years, I was like, I don't think I have a future here, but I don't know what I want to do next. And um, I was starting to see like a bunch of people that I had worked with at startups in the past were getting jobs at crypto companies. And it was so funny because some of them, I was like, I didn't even know they were into crypto. Like, I didn't even know they liked this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you're getting a job in crypto. And then I was like, why am I not getting a job in crypto? Like, if I like it so much, like, and clearly a bunch of my friends, people I respect, are making this move, I should be doing it too. And like, why didn't I do it years ago? So, um, and I I started interviewing, and I interviewed at multiple crypto companies, and I was getting rejected. I was
Yeah.
getting pretty discouraged. But MetaMask was actually my first choice. I was like really passionate about getting this role at MetaMask. The interview process took a while, and there were some times where I was like, "Oh, they probably don't want to hire me. That's why it's taking so long."
Tell
They're just
me about it. I had the exact same experience.
yeah, so it was slow. The crazy thing was at one point the recruiting manager who was working with me got COVID, so I didn't hear from him for like 4 weeks. And then he got back to me. I was like, yeah, I had COVID. I was out. I was really sick. I was like, oh, okay. Like here I was thinking they didn't like me, and it was the poor guy had COVID, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it took a while, but, I was interviewing for this role, and I actually didn't know exactly what I would be working on. But when I came in working on Snaps. So, and it was really cool because it was like, oh, this is like a new thing that we're building. It was still in beta. And at the time, it was like, okay, well, we have MetaMask Flask. We have some teams that are already building Snaps, but they wanted to like grow it and also figure out how can we get this into the market? How can we get this into the MetaMask extension where anyone could install Snaps? And what's the right way to go about it? So it was like now I was able to like sink my teeth into like a product that had a path to production to be in the market, and it was like a really cool like technical product, and I had many years of experience as being like an app developer. So now working as a platform and like supporting external developers who were going to be building apps on this platform was a really exciting for me, and I was able to apply like all my learnings and like my own perspective as what was important to me when I was building apps to be able to apply that to this, and also think about what are the right like categories of functionality that we can launch with that makes sense for MetaMask and would be attractive to like MetaMask users. So like, one of the things that that when I was interviewing that they liked about me was I'd been using MetaMask for years, right? Um, and one thing that was really cool was the day that I joined was the day that the acquisition of my crypto was finalized. So the day that I joined, all the my crypto team also joined. And so one funny thing was people thought I had come from my crypto, and I was like, no, 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 I'm the one guy that's joining today that didn't come from my crypto. But also, so I got to meet all the people from my crypto, and I got to show them I still had an envelope that they had sent out like years before, where they were like, you can send us a self-addressed stamped envelope and we'll mail you back stickers. And I still had those stickers in the envelope, and it was like handwritten by Taylor. And I was like, look, I still have this. Like I was a my crypto user even before I was using MetaMask. Like I go real far back with it. So it was like a little bit starstruck to like meet someone that was like a celebrity to me. Um, and so yeah, it was just like really exciting. So that's what the first 2 years I was at MetaMask. I've been at MetaMask for more than 2.5 years now. My first 2 years was leading the Snaps product and taking it to our launch that we did in September of last year and onboarding all these developers and building up like this new developer ecosystem, which is cool because it's just something that like didn't exist before. It's like the idea of like building an app that runs inside of MetaMask and having it be like self-contained. It's like a mini app platform.
It's
That's
really
been like really exciting. Yeah.
really cool. It's one of like it's what got me excited about MetaMask. I never realized when I because the way we met, and people might not know this, is at some point, maybe 2 years ago, after you, I guess, recently joined MetaMask, which I now know. I then thought you were like an old head at MetaMask. But I applied for the dev role at the MetaMask Snaps teams, and I almost got it. I got an offer. I don't know if you know, but eventually, because I wanted to move to Dubai to cut taxes and stuff, the legal team got scared, and that's how I didn't actually join eventually. Um, but I remember just getting so excited as well about Snaps because it unlocks just a ton of functionality and a ton of like user experience which you wouldn't have had otherwise. Nowadays, or it's like even then and even still now, you still have to go to just a bunch of random websites. You don't know if you're on the right URL. There's a lot of phishing attacks and stuff, and it's just very fragmented as well.
Hmm.
Whereas if you had all the extensions that you care about in your browser, like I have, MetaMask and a few other extensions in my browser, it's just there. It just works. You can convert whenever you want to convert. You can like upload stuff to Filecoin or whatever you want to do, like on the spot, wherever you are. And it gives more, I think it gives more native integration. I think it's really an amazing product. I want to say that I really relate to what you said earlier about the interview at MetaMask being lengthy and it being like a roller coaster because I had the exact same experience where do they not like me? Oh, now the manager texted me. I guess they like me. Again, a period of silence. Okay, I guess I'm not gonna get to this job. It's way above my head. This is MetaMask. I feel like I'm not MetaMask material. Oh, they actually like me again.
Yeah, which is probably how most of these things go. I mean, consensus is just we're looking for really good people, and so we definitely scrutinize a lot in the interview process. So but it's just funny that like when I came in, I was like, oh man, a bunch of them probably don't like me, and then I ended up talking to some of the people who interviewed me, and I was like, oh wow, they actually did like me. I just didn't understand that when I was interviewing.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's I wouldn't like I think the meta me personally, I don't know about you, but I think the MetaMask interviewing process was really good. It was really fair and it was really nice, honestly. And I'm not saying it just because you're here. I actually told this to many people that I told the story about my interviewing there. And I actively encourage people, go look at their career page because they have good jobs, they pay good money, and they actually have I don't know how it is to work there, but based on the people that I interacted with when I interviewed there, it feels like it's a nice place to work at,
Yeah.
or at least the Snaps team. I don't know
Yeah, I
about
can say that too. Yeah.
you. You used to shield tokens. That's interesting. You
Yeah,
were
yeah. I
you
don't
were
tell
like a
too many
troll?
people that, but I did. Yes.
You were
The
like a troll or something?
You remember when everyone was making these anonymous Twitter accounts and the name was like some permutation of Shill something? Like there was like Shill Nye, Shill Clinton. I was
Yeah,
Shill House. So my picture was like Millhouse, but he had like Bitcoin logos over his eyes, right? On his glasses, right? So I was Shill House. That was like what and so I mean, we were just trying to post alpha. We were just trying to find like the right, ICOs or the right tokens. Nowadays people talk about meme coins. Back in the day, they were ICOs and you had to like send money to some random address, right? And then they would send you back tokens like some months later, right? And it was like not something I would have recommended most people to do. But on Twitter, this was just how we like talked to each other, right? This was just how we like tried to coordinate like what did we think was good to buy? What did we think would end up on like Binance at some point? And, I wasn't good at it. So I eventually realized, okay, I shouldn't be doing this because I actually am not good at giving out advice and I don't want people to lose money based on like what I think people should buy.
interesting.
And then at some point I changed my name to Midwit Millhouse because I was like, okay, I'm bad at this. I'm a midwit. I'm the midwit on the graph who should be giving out like trading advice. I'm not like dumb enough to like ape into something that works out and I'm not smart enough to predict. So I just stuck with that name. And so, when I joined MetaMask and now it was like, okay, on Twitter, I'm like representing MetaMask partly, right? I was
Yeah,
like, should I change the name? Because it's a really dumb name. But then
yeah.
I was like, no, it's how I got, it's how I got to where I am. Like realized I'm a midwit and I still like Millhouse, so here I am.
You aren't quite like I see you around and I see you being very active even if you're on side projects and everything. And I always think that it's such a, especially if you're a devrel or if you're like a product manager, you actually are a public figure and you actually do represent the company, and it's such a delicate thing to maneuver because I might say some stupid thing which is just not going to be good for somebody. And I think it's like a lot easier if you're just an IC, like even a senior IC, but you're an IC, like it's fine. Oh, he's just, we don't evaluate him based on what he says on Twitter because he just has to code well. Uh, so how did you make the transition from, because I remember you were a programmer. How did the transition even feel to go from like actual programming to product management? And as a product manager, do you still kind of get involved in the code? Do you maybe look at PRs or like at architectural discussions? How does that go?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of my background, how I made that transition. So when I started out as a developer, I had studied electrical engineering and I originally thought I was going to get a job at like Intel, some like chip manufacturer, and I was going to design, computer chips for a living. And that was what I had like studied. That was like one of the few things I was able to grasp in the electrical engineering curriculum. Once we did like quantum mechanics, I was like, okay, I can't, right? So, but binary Boolean algebra was like, okay, I can grasp this, right? I can wrap my head around it. So I was in college and I was really into the internet, and I, was really into websites and stuff like that. I was into human computer interaction. I was taking courses on this, and I'd been building websites for a long time. And then this is when, like, the internet industry, I mean, I graduated in 2007. So, we had the dot-com crash in 2000, but things were like growing again. We had, like, companies like Yahoo were a big deal at the time, right? And it was like, that was cool to go work at Yahoo back then, right? Um, and Google was just starting out. And then I was like, yeah, I do want to get a job in the internet industry. Like, I want to get a job working at like a startup, something on the web, right? I don't actually want to go work for like a hardware manufacturer. So I basically, in my senior year, completely changed the types of jobs that I was looking for. And um, I, became a full stack developer. And like, I was building websites for a living. Like, I was doing like PHP and Perl and JavaScript before we had libraries, and CSS before we had frameworks and everything. And it wasn't easy. But that's what I was doing. And at the time, uh, in 2008, Facebook launched their app platform. And so I started building Facebook apps, which initially I was like, why would anyone want to do that? But one of my friends, was really into it. He understood like the opportunity right away. So I was helping him out. Like, one of the first Facebook apps I've worked on, I was doing the CSS. I wasn't even doing the back end or anything like that. There were other guys who was doing that, and I was just doing front end. And so I was dabbling in a lot of stuff. I had some roles where I was like the UX lead, or I was like, front end developer, or I was full stack. And I ended up getting a job at the very first team that eventually became Jam City. They have like mobile games now. Back then they were called SGN, and we were doing Facebook games, right? That was initially what we were doing. So we were like the biggest competitor at the time with Zynga, back when Zynga first started. And
Wow.
so being a full stack developer and working on these small projects, where in some cases it was me as one developer owning an entire like project, right, of a game, right? And just doing whatever needed to be done to keep that game, maintain it, come up with new features, whatever. So I had always been interested in like game design, and was always interested in building games. And it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I could do this on the side as well. So, I was laid off from Jam City because they were pivoting to focus on mobile games, and I had no experience with that, right? So they were like, "Oh, you're just a Facebook game developer," which is like funny to say now that that was even like a thing at the time. But they were like, "Yeah, we have to let you go. We're gonna focus on mobile now." So at the time it was okay, well, I want to keep making games, and I didn't have a way to do that. So I just basically went independent, and I just started making my own games and seeing if I could make it work. And eventually I was pretty successful on the Facebook platform, and I had like millions of users. And it was like, when you go independent, right, and you're basically just a one person shop, you're doing everything,
Yeah.
right? And so like, maybe you're not doing the best sort of like project management, maybe you're not really doing the best sort of like what a product manager should be able to do, but you're doing it. So I'm doing everything. I'm doing the graphics, I'm doing front end, back end, DevOps, all that stuff. Not in a super structured way, but I'm learning it the hard way. And I was running something successful enough that at some point I was able to sell one of my games to another company. So I had like my first exit. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was like, okay, I managed to do this on my own. And so the interesting thing is, like, when you're doing these types of freelance projects as like a full stack developer, as a programmer, you may not think that you're building those other skills, but you are. And so you are like, uh, you are exploring what a product manager or a project manager would do without even necessarily realizing it. And if you can go about it in a structured way and really think about, okay, what are the next features I need to do? Let me go interview some users. I mean, I would read like the comments that I would get on my games, right? And I would learn from like what these users would tell me, right? I built one game that was popular with moms who would wake up before their kids would wake up, and they would play in the morning every day, right? So it was like, okay, I would learn like how to like design the game around that like daily play style, right? Where it was like, okay, in like 5 to 10 minutes you can play this game, and then you can go wake up your kids and get them ready for school, like that sort of thing. So I hit a point after selling to this company where I was like, I want to build games that are a bigger scale, right? The games that I was doing were very simple. It was like little web games, just like HTML and CSS on Facebook. And I was like, I want to build like the really cool games that are like Flash. You know, there's like animation, there's 3D characters, all that kind of stuff. I don't have the resources to do that. I don't know everything that I need to do that myself. I need to go join a company. And I really wanted to like have the game design approach. So I was like, okay, I think I need to come in as like a game producer or a product manager or something like that, and you know, be able to design games because that is a passion of mine. So I interviewed at some places and I ended up joining OMG Pop. And at OMG Pop, I remember when I came in, I was thinking, okay, I need to find another producer or product manager and I need to shadow them and learn from them. And the day I joined, they were like, we don't have any other product managers. We had one, but things didn't go well and he left. We had another one and he decided he didn't want to do it anymore and went back to programming. So we don't actually have anyone for you to shadow. Like, we need you to define how product management should work here and the
Wow.
whole playbook and everything. And I was like, well, I've made a mistake. Like, this is bad, but I'm not going to admit that this was a mistake and I'm going to try to figure it out. So
Yeah.
that first year, I wouldn't say I was a good product manager. I wouldn't say that my colleagues liked me. There was a lot of conflict and things did not go well. But I did get to produce a game called Draw Something that became a mega hit, right? And it allowed OMG Pop to sell to Zynga, which is funny because I ended up, producing a game that sold to Zynga, which used to be my competitor when I was at Jam City. And yeah, that was where I learned the hard way a lot about product management. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm a product manager. Like, I'm going to continue to find roles doing that. So it was like, I read some books, or I read like the forwards to some books and then didn't get any further. I like watched some talks and everything, but I learned it by doing. And the interesting thing was, again, like, I learned those skills as a freelancer, building my own projects, right? Where then it was like, okay, the thing that I had to learn beyond that was just how to work with other people, which is something you need for any kind of role. But in
Sure.
terms of like designing a product, figuring out the strategy, talking to users, looking at the data and stuff, like, you can learn that. You really can learn that building your own projects. And you can say, as a programmer, yeah, I want to learn those other skills. Really, it just comes down to, do you want to, take on that type of role? Because I tell people, like, product manager is like a thankless role. You're the person who comes in and fills the gaps where the team isn't able to solve certain things, or like the things that other people don't want to do. You're just the person who makes sure that everything works, that everything runs, and like, you do a lot of the coordination, which is the thing that like most people don't want to do. Coordination is not fun. It's like, do you like working with people? Probably not. Coordination involves you to work with lots of people. It's like compounding the hard part of like working in teams, right? So,
And
but
also,
yeah, that was how I made the switch, and it was a little bit of like, I went in and told them that I had the skills to do it, and they liked me because I had shipped my own mobile games. I had actually started to do that. I had built my own games on Facebook. Like, I had the experience in exactly what they were trying to do. They were like, we have Facebook games. We're building a mobile game. We need someone who has some experience in this. And that was, like, they were happy to hire me and bring me in to do it.
this is an insane story. I have a few things to touch on. I see a few parallels with myself, but you are on a whole different scale. Because Draw Something, I just want to say, for people who don't know what Draw Something is, like, it's a huge app. It used to be actually huge. I used to play it as a little kid. This was big. This was like crazy. And if you don't know, if you're watching this and you don't know what it is, just Google Draw Something, because it really is big. That's one thing that I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to make the parallel, because I've seen this in myself, and this is, I also started freelancing and just building random websites for random people. The intent initially of my career, like, and if now 5 years ago, was to, okay, at some point I'm going to build my own apps and I'm going to be like some bazillionaire from it. It's going to work out that way. It didn't, but we're here. And so I started to build like my own YouTube channel because I figured it's definitely going to help me sell my services, and it kind of started to snowball where I still, to this day, maybe not anymore this year, but to last year, still have always been asking myself, what am I specializing in? What's my niche? And I never could give an answer because I'm a guy that I can talk a little bit. I have a few like public speaking places where spoke on stage. I have a YouTube channel, obviously. I can code front end, I can code back end, I can do Solidity, I can do Go. I can do all these things. I'm not a master at any of them. And it just kind of happened, kind of like it just kind of happened for you. Now, the way I try to take it forward and try to build up more impact and figure out, what's my next step is, recently I've come with the answer of, well, maybe I should start a consulting shop. I'm going to be kind of like the, I guess, engineering manager or whatever you want to call it, because I know a little bit of everything and I can sort of, hopefully, I can lead a team. I haven't yet managed a team. I led projects, but not managed a team. And my whole fear and the reason why I really wanted to interview you was, okay, this is a huge identity change. I've been a generalist engineer until now, and I've definitely led projects, but going from that into this, it's a lot more management, it's a lot more product decisions. It is a different animal to a degree, even if some skills are translatable, as you said. How did you cope with it, the identity change? Because for me, it's like a major fear.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, I would say that partly okay, so I still program, right? I still, program on the side. I still practice, make sure that I have my skills. Partly I love JavaScript. So like I do projects in JavaScript every now and then. You had asked me earlier, like, do I do programming in my current role? I build snaps as a way to dog food the platform, right? So I've built more than 10 snaps at this point. I occasionally will build, a snap with some new feature that we're, currently working on, right? So I can sort of like get a sense of like the developer experience of it, but also see the capabilities of it. And then that usually becomes like, okay, this is an example of something that you can do with it. So like I'm a technical product manager, I have a technical background, I'm able to like, comment or understand some of the technical topics, even though I'm not like day to day deep in the code, right? Um, I also will occasionally, like I wanted to learn React. I'm not good at React, but at one point I did build a website with React just so I could understand it because like everybody's using it, right? So like if people I'm working with are using it, I need to at least understand the quirks of it. And also, my experience is part of what informs my role now, right? So like being a product manager and having that technical experience is useful for me working on technical projects, right? Working in software development. So that's part of the identity. So my identity is not just that it's completely changed to being a product manager, but that I'm a product manager with this background and I do have the ability to dabble and then talk about. And one of my skill sets that I think is important for me is that I can explain a technical topic to a non-technical person, right? So to a non-technical audience, I can say, okay, here's what you need to know to understand what it is that we're doing. Because sometimes, especially at a place like MetaMask where we're innovating in a lot of different areas, and there's a lot of areas where it's like, okay, esoteric elements of how a website talks to an extension or a mobile app, and
Yeah.
JSON RPC API and all of these things that are not many people even in crypto would want to know about it. Um, my ability to understand those things to enough of a degree that then I can explain them to someone in marketing or in biz dev or customer support or something like that is super important. And I will say that like when we talk about like skill sets, okay, maybe you have a generalist background and maybe you're thinking about, okay, I want to be a product manager, but what does that entail? Part of being a product manager or a product owner or a product lead is it's your job to know things, right? Like it's your job to know enough about all the different aspects of the product that if someone has a question, you can answer it,
Yeah.
right? And so if you're the type of product manager that is constantly like, I don't know, let me go ask the subject matter expert, then you're not doing a great job, right? Ideally, you're able to say, oh, I've talked to the subject matter expert, and here's what you need to know. Like, here, I can give you an answer. Here's why that bug is affecting the product in a certain way. Or here's how this new feature will be beneficial to our users or developers in the future, right? Or here is the data or customer interviews that we did that informed why we want to build this new feature, right? So it's your job to know things. And as a generalist, you actually are capable of knowing a lot of different things. And so you may feel like, okay, I'm not a super deep subject matter expert in any area. So that's like a fault. But in reality is you don't have to be a deep subject matter expert. You have to be someone who can have a holistic view of like everything you need to know about the product, like the different facets of it, in order to make the right decisions. And that's the other thing, is that, you know, a lot of both leading a team, management in the product area and so forth, is people are trying to make the right decisions, and they need someone who can help make decisions, right?
Yeah.
They need someone who can help think through the different trade-offs, the challenges, you know, relate a problem back to, okay, what are our goals? What's our mission? What is it that we're ultimately trying to optimize for? What are the key metrics that we need to be looking at? And they need someone who they can come to you and, here's my question, here's the data, here's where I'm stuck. Can you help me along? Can you help me arrive at a conclusion, right? And so one of the pieces of feedback that I've gotten in the past is people have said to me, when we need an answer, we can come to you, right? And that's like, okay, like I'm doing something right, like I can help you get unstuck. Because a lot of times teams are incredibly inefficient because they're stuck in like analysis paralysis. They
Hmm.
can't make a decision. They can't agree on a way to proceed. We talk about like disagree and commit, like go and, head down a certain path and get to the point where you say, okay, is this working or is it not? But at least you're making progress and you're learning from it. And so that ability to say, look, I've heard everybody. We've heard all the trade-offs. We've discussed it at length. Here's a decision. Let's proceed in this path and reevaluate. To be able to do that gets people unstuck. And that's like your job, right? Is to help
Yeah.
people to be able to make progress.
I fully agree. I think it's not a perfect, like the dictator model. It sounds bad. It sounds like awful, but like you ultimately have to have somebody that kind of knows all the aspects of a product or of a project and can make decisions that are actually not perfect, but decent, or at least, as you said, go down a path and figure it out as you go. Because I've seen teams before where they spend like inordinate amounts of time planning a product and planning, and you're not building anything, or building and staging, and you just build and you add stuff and you change stuff and you never ship, and it's not getting you anywhere. You're not touching the market, and that's really the only way where you can actually find out if you've built something useful, if it's even like, even if it's about technical like sort of stuff, like is it buggy? Okay, you can dog food it, but there's only so much stuff you can find as a single or as a small team of 5 or 10 people. Whereas if it hits users, especially at a bigger scale, okay, it can be risky. You obviously don't want to ship slop. But I think honestly, over the years that I've been a programmer, I've reached a conclusion where let's figure out the smallest scope we can do and ship that, and figure out the next smallest thing and ship that. And the long-term plan can change, but it just keeps you just moving. And that's, there's a lot of value in that. And I think there's a lot of value in how you've positioned yourself as a technical product manager, where you kind of understand all sides of things and you can make these decisions and get stuff pushing. I've actually recently come to the conclusion that there may be more value in a good generalist like you than in a specialist. I'm not entirely sure if I agree with that, but I think I'm starting to get to convince myself of that.
I would say that, like, how there's been a lot of discourse over the past, I don't know, 10 years about like what makes a 10x engineer? Like, how do you find 10x engineers? How do you put a 10x engineer on a team? And, how the success of your product may depend on having 10x engineers. And 10x engineers exist for sure. But I've said somewhat tongue in cheek in the past that your 10x engineer is actually a product manager or some sort of product lead. And it's that there's someone who can help get the team unstuck, help make the right decisions about how to proceed, help identify the areas where there may be blind spots or pitfalls or things that the team may not be thinking about because each member of the team is in the weeds, right? They're
Yeah.
focused on a specific topic and sometimes not able to like put their head up and say, oh, what are the other things that we're not thinking about? Or
Yeah.
someone who's able to help, plan ahead and take a very complex roadmap and break it down into, okay, here's what we should do over the next 2 weeks, for example, right? Like, here's the things that we can tackle first. Here's how we can sequence things. And that enables everybody on the team to work really effectively, right? So you have your, specialists, you have your engineers, your designers, and so forth, who are all, like building the product. But the person who can help them do that effectively, I mean, that's your 10x, right? So I say a little bit tongue in cheek because I'm not trying to like discount the concept of like a 10x engineer or a 10x designer, but that capability, which is a bit of a specialization, like eventually that becomes your specialty and it's something that you build with experience. But it really is like what we think of as a generalist should really be thought of as like someone who can think about all the aspects of a product effectively, someone who can like visualize the entire product, and who can visualize how do we get from where we are today to the end result, right? Like, what's the best way to go and build out all the components till we eventually get to something that is really what we envisioned from the start.
Have you read any Scott Adams? I don't know if I got his name right, but there is this bald, slim dude with glasses called Scott
Yes.
Adams, and he wrote multiple books. But there's this particular one where he mentions what he calls skill stacking, and basically the story goes like he wasn't an exceptional guy, but he was kind of a decent illustrator. He was kind of a somewhat funny guy. He knew about corporate stuff, and that's how Dilbert came about, which was a huge success and really changed his life. And then you go on to think about it, and again, I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. Where okay, you know a bit of UX and UI, you know a bit of a front end, a bit of back end, you know a bit of this and that, and it puts you in a position where even though if I were to put you in individually in a specific role on any of these things, maybe you might not even get the job. Or hopefully you would, but maybe. But put them all together, and it just becomes this crazy amount of value.
Yeah, it's similar to like a DevRel type of role, right? You need to have those different skill sets. We see it in creative things too, like someone who's a musician who can also like, do video, right? Who can do like really good vlogs, who can like be funny on social media and stuff like that, and also knows how to like maybe throw an event, right? They can be really successful. Like, everybody's like, why is David Guetta so successful? Why is he such a big deal? It's not just that he's a good musician and DJ. He knew how to throw parties, right? Like, he was pioneering like the electronic music festival, right? Like,
Yeah.
he did that, right? He knew how to do that. Like, why is Steve Aoki so good? He's not just a musician, he's a businessman, right? Like, he knows how to like run a record label and like promote and stuff like that. So like those types of skill sets, right? That type of skill stacking, we see that a lot of times. And it's partly why it's not just that you're good at the thing that you're trying to, do, right? Like, maybe you want to like be a successful makeup artist, but you're stacking that with, how to produce a good YouTube short, right? And you know how to like do the lighting and like come up with the topics and follow the trends. And that's what makes you like a famous makeup artist. It's not necessarily that you're the best at doing makeup.
It's true. It's true. Do you think in the corporate world, like generalists who skill stack well are like appropriately rewarded for what they do?
That's a tough question. And I will preface this by saying I feel like we appropriately award that skill set at MetaMask. Um, but to your question, like in the corporate world, part of the reason that I say product manager can be a thankless job is because I think that that's not appropriately awarded. And I think that it's partly that it's one of those things that it's hard to demonstrate. Like, if let's say you get to your yearly review and someone asks you, what have you been doing over the past year? And you are able to say, okay, I've plugged all the gaps for the team. I've helped the team get unstuck. I've made sure that they're each working effectively. To some degree, someone might look at that and say, okay, that's the basic expectation, right? Like, that's not really above and beyond. Like, what are you doing that's really setting you apart, right? And it's hard because in reality, a lot of teams don't have that, right? A lot of teams are just, dysfunctional, ineffective, right? They're not able to make progress. And it's not the fault of anyone on the team. I mean, I always say, like, the biggest contributor to inefficiency is just poor leadership, right? It's just poor management, poor ability to coordinate, right? Like, the people you hired are good. You thought they were good enough to hire them. And then you put them in a team where they're just not able to execute effectively, right? And
Yeah.
so there isn't a lot of appreciation because, you know, if maybe some organizations are not good at measuring that, right? They're not good at saying, hey, to what degree is this team actually able to operate efficiently? And it's hard to measure that if you don't really know what it looks like, right? And so, you may be able to say, okay, this team has been able to ship faster, right? Or like they've been able to close bugs faster, respond to user feedback faster, but it can be really hard to demonstrate that.
But if
I think that oftentimes the way corporations measure like a product lead type of role is just based on output, right? So it's like, okay, if you get to work on a product that makes a lot of money or gets a lot of users, then that looks good. But otherwise, it's hard to demonstrate that. Let's say you work on a product that is just you were asked to work on a product that wasn't a good idea, right? But you did a really good job running that team and delivering within the time frame, right? It's hard to measure, hey, were you helping that team be efficient and arrived at the end result effectively, even though the end result didn't do well in the market, right? That can be very hard to measure. And so I think part of it is like, one of the things that you have to do is you have to be good about like being vocal about like how the team is making progress, right? Like how you're delivering, right? You just have to be good at like being able to say like it's your job to be the noisy one on the team, right? Like, there was a offsite that we were at, and we had to Snaps was one of the teams that had to like present their progress and what they want to accomplish over the next quarter. And I was like texting the team. I was like, who from our team should present? And they were like, I think it's you. It's you. Like, why would it be any of us? You have to go up and do it. I was like, okay, fine. Yes. Okay. So it was like, but it's like, yeah, you're the one who's responsible for like communicating out to the rest of the organization, to the stakeholders, to other teams, to the customers. Here's what we're doing. Here's the progress we're making. Here's how we're getting closer to accomplishing our goals. Here's how we're tracking. And so a lot of it really does come down to communication. And it's not just what you do, but it's how you make everyone aware of that really is important, where you're not just at the end of the day defined on whether the product itself was a hit.
I think I agree because I don't know if you read Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, but it's
Mm-hmm.
precisely the thing. You can't really judge the choices you made based on the outcome because there's always some luck involved, and you might have made great choices. And even you said how fast you ship is a potentially important metric. Even that is not necessarily the best metric in and of itself alone, because what if you just ship the wrong stuff?
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I think you're right about communicating and learning how to communicate well. I guess it's more of a gut based thing, or like a vibe thing where you I guess you kind of know when you have a good product manager because everything kind of is smooth, and you don't know, and when it doesn't run smoothly, then you kind of know that something's wrong, and maybe it's the product
Right,
manager.
right, exactly. And it's also like, in order to be effective at it, you have to be good at um like responding to feedback and correcting. So like, to one example, this may be a dumb example, but like if you're playing a sport, right? You have to be aware of like, okay, I ran to this corner of the field and I lost possession of the ball, and then I was behind the other team and not able to recover it. So now I know like I shouldn't do that. Like I need to have a different strategy, right? If you're able to do that type of correction, then that's really effective. So like, as a product lead or as someone who's responsible for sort of like being the visible, person on the team to say like, here's what we're doing, if you're able to see, okay, here's what works, right? Like, okay, each week it's like, okay, I shared out the weekly update and people responded to it or they didn't respond to it, or they had a lot of questions, they got stuck on stuff, maybe they over indexed on something that wasn't really what I wanted them to take away from it, then I'm correcting. It's similar to like public speaking, right? Like every time I do public speaking, I then watch the recording, I talk to people, and I figure out, okay, did it come across well? What should I do differently next time? Oh, I shouldn't say like or or right or okay so much. Like I notice where I'm pausing weirdly, or I didn't practice enough, right, to be prepared to, say something clearly. So you correct, right? So that sort of thing is like what you're saying about like, it's kind of vibe space. You're over time, it takes time with a team, with an organization, to figure out the right flow, the right fit, what works for that organization. But over time, you're course correcting. You're figuring out, what is it that people are looking for? How do we demonstrate our success? What are the metrics that really click with people, that help them understand that we're making progress towards our goals? And that helps you to be more effective.
I think that's a good conclusion to the topic. I like that. I can stand behind that. I wanted to say at some point earlier that you really, if I were to describe you, I wouldn't even call you a product manager. I'd call you a builder based on what I know about you, like now, what I know about you from like Twitter, what I see you posting about Chublins, about all the other side projects that you have, you're like actually very prolific. And I also see you talking about Snapshot, and it just feels like you're excited about the product in and of itself, not just doing your job. I guess there's a few questions that I want to ask you. In what way do you feel like Snaps is your baby is one of them? And how, like, is it something in you that just drives you to build a lot of stuff, or do you make yourself do it because you know it's beneficial?
That's great. That's a great question. So on the first one, Snaps is something that was invented, thought up years before I joined, right? So it first, came up in 2019. Dan Finley, who's one of the founders of MetaMask, was working with a company called Agoric, and they were exploring like how could you add Cosmos to MetaMask, right? MetaMask is all EVM based, so you would have to figure out a way to like build an add-on, right? Like figure out some way to safely expand what MetaMask can do and self-contain that. And the first snap that was built before they even called it Snaps was a Cosmos extension to MetaMask, right? Which you can still find the repository on GitHub somewhere. And so by the time I joined, this project had existed for a few years. Various people had been involved, and I was coming in, to get involved in something. And so, like, it wasn't like it was my idea, which is
Yeah,
funny because it's the same with like draw something, right? It wasn't my idea. It was based on an existing product that OMG Pop had, where they were like, okay, we need to figure out how to adapt this for mobile, right? And so, what I came in to do was partly to say, okay, here's how this makes sense in a mobile context, and here's where we're going to make some pretty drastic changes. Like instead of it being a real time lobby, it's asynchronous one to one, right? And so like there's reasons why we're doing that for mobile that really works for the mobile platform, right? Um, and so similarly with Snaps, like what I came in and did was like, okay, here's the categories of features that we can take this and like present it to users, and we can say, okay, it's not just like a platform that allows you to extend MetaMask in lots of ways and it's vague. It's like, okay, here's a few specific categories. Similar to like Jeff Bezos being like, okay, it's an e-commerce website, but it's books, right? Like, so you understand books, you want books, come buy books, right? It's like,
yeah,
okay, it's a application platform, but we have like security, we have notifications, and we have the ability to add support for new blockchains, right? Like you want to go and use Solana with MetaMask, here's a way that you can do that. You want to go and add like a transaction filtering service, right? Here's where you go and click and install that. And now you have like Tenderly or like Wallet Guard or one of those, services. So in that sense, like it does feel like it's been my baby in a way, even though like I'm not the person who invented it, right? But I was very much involved. It's like you come in as like a stepfather or adopted
yeah.
parent or something where it's like, okay, I come in and I have a lot of influence, a lot of ways to shape, the trajectory of it, right? And bringing it to market, right? So it's like not necessarily like the initial beta phase, but like yeah, the launch of it. I mean, I got to go to like permissionless and give a talk and like talk about like this launch of it and like plan all of that. It's like yeah, it feels very like very sentimental for me. And the second thing about being a builder, so what I will say is that part of the reason that I was so interested in programming when I was in college was the what really motivated me was the satisfaction of like building something and putting it in front of someone and seeing how they respond to
Oh
it,
yeah. Oh
right?
yeah.
And the whole idea of like building something and then seeing someone enjoy it, right? That was what was really powerful for me. And part of the reason that I like programming was you could do that in a matter of a few months as opposed to like years, right? Like any other type of like engineering discipline, it was like, yeah, I've spent like 6 years working on a parking garage, you know what I mean? Like designing like a freaking building or something, or like, a new ship, or, a new like I don't know, toothpaste or something. And it takes forever to get it through manufacturing and get it onto store shelves. With this, it's like, yeah, in 3 months we have an MVP and we can, invite people to come to a website or, get on test flight and like download it and play with it. I mean, we had like the first version of draw something for people to do like user testing within like 2 months. and it was like, okay, I can draw on the screen, I can do the like little finger painting, and I can comment on how it feels, and that was like really cool, right? You can't do that in every discipline. And so at one point, I've been self-employed a few times in my career. At one point, I actually called myself an inventor, which was just kind of like presumptuous, and probably people look at that and cringe, but it was like, yeah, that's really what I like to do. I just want to invent something. And as a game designer, one of the things that I always wanted to do was I actually wanted to design a new game mechanic. Like I wanted to design a game that didn't exist before. So not just like, oh, my own permutation of like an endless runner or a match 3 game or something like that, but I wanted to design like a new kind of puzzle game, like a different puzzle mechanic that didn't exist before. So all of that is to say, like, the motivation is just the way people respond to the product, right? Like, if I build a game, I'm building it so I can like have my kids play it and be like, hey, you
Yeah.
got to play a game that your dad made, like you got to like do something, like totally different. It's like I can put my name on it and say like I made that game, right? Like, and it's very satisfying, when I show it to someone and they're like, oh wow, this is fun, like I want to play this again, like good job. It's sort of like my kind of like, how will people remember me after I'm gone? Hopefully, I made something, that they look at, right? Like I'm not building pyramids or statues or whatever. I'm building like a JavaScript game you can play on your phone. It's like that kind of thing, right? So that's the sort of thing where it's like, it's sort of like exercising that creative muscle, and so it's like, yeah, in some cases I'm building something because I want to test the product I'm building on. Like I worked at a company called Hopscotch. They have a visual programming environment for kids to learn how to code. I would build like games and apps in the Hopscotch environment just to like sort of like test it, try it out, learn how it works and everything, and to get sort of examples of like, oh, here's some different things you can do with it, right? So I would like kind of push the limits of it, right? But for the most part, it's like, yeah, that it doesn't necessarily bring me any value to spend some of my free time building like a port of Minesweeper, or like a game that's based on the rules of chess, or like a website about, I don't know, whatever dumb thing I think of next, right? It's not really about that. It's like, yeah, that's sort of like what keeps me going. It's like, yeah, that's sort of fun for me, and it's nice to be able to do that in some cases without necessarily thinking about, will this make money, or is it like worth the effort invested? It's just, yeah, that's how I like, that's like fun for me. It's like what I like to do.
There's a lot of beauty in it, and precisely for what you said, it's like now there's you can go on this domain and you can find this thing, and a few people use it, a few people like it, and I made it, or I've been a big part of making it, and it's beautiful. I still look at things that I've done years ago, even small things where people still use it to this day, like smart contracts or like small components in a website, which for some reason remained unchanged. They changed the whole website, but that little thing that's still there. And I made it, and it's beautiful to look at it because it's, yeah, you're right. It's like you left something behind yourself. And also, I wanted to ask you at some point, how did the whole idea of snaps came about? And you answered that it came before you from Dan Finley. A and I think you gave exactly the answer that I was thinking about. That, yeah, you can adopt, so to say, a baby or a project, and it can become your baby as well. And it's just, there's a lot of beauty in building. And I've tried, for example, other stuff in my career like auditing. I'm not sure how familiar you are with like
Yeah, yeah,
security
yeah.
reviews and that type of stuff. And it's interesting. It's definitely very technically challenging. It's definitely very well paid. I can't make myself do it. I can't make myself focus, because when I finish my day of work, I do not see something there that wasn't there when I started. And it's
Right,
just,
right.
there's no dopamine hit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and no disrespect to people who love to do auditing,
Oh yeah.
but I think even someone who likes to do auditing, if you get to like give a talk, or, create some sort of like auditing tool, or publish like a paper about like, something really, technical related to that, that's probably what I would be most excited about. It's like
Yeah,
not
yeah.
so much the routine of like doing the auditing and being really great at it, but being able to like produce something and have my name on the, author list or something like that. That's probably what
100%.
would motivate me.
You see a lot of them turn like half builders, the one guys that build the Kidna, or all the other formal verification stuff. You see Cyphren, who's building a lot of stuff, even though they're an audit company. I think the ones that actually enjoy auditing more than developing are a rare breed,
Yeah.
and that's why they're probably so well paid.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't want to take on too much more of your time. We can wrap this up. But there's one thing that I wanted to ask you, you being at MetaMask for a while now. When I joined, I remember seeing a Borat reference in some example code or something. Or not when I joined, sorry, I made a mistake there. When I interviewed, I remember seeing a Borat reference, and I had to at some point present, like, build my own little snaps and then present the whole process of how I've built it, and like what went wrong in building it, why were the docs not updated or whatever else. And at the very end of my like little talk, I remember I put like a great success from Borat, because I felt like, okay, if they have it, I have to also have it. Like, how did that happen? Why do you guys have a Borat reference in the code?
There's a few people within the company who don't let these memes die. Like I'm telling you, someone posted one of these Borat memes today in one of the chat channels. I don't know. It's like maybe it's a we're aging ourselves kind of thing. Like we're a bunch of us are at that age where like Borat was a big deal for us in our 20s or something, and like that was one of the big like memes, and those like little like sound bites are stuck in our head. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like and sometimes you can't help yourself when you're writing documentation. You can't help like dropping one of these like little references. So yeah, I'll say that like that's just one of the memes that within like our like MetaMask and consensus chat channels keeps resurfacing. It doesn't get old.
I would be one of, if I would be at MetaMask, I'd be one of the people resurfacing it. I don't,
Yes.
and I would be one of the people like actually deeply researching over years, where did it come from initially. That's one of my curiosities.
It's like a get blame. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was really fun and really amazing and super useful to me, at least.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. I honestly really love this interview. I think it was one of the best that I recorded like this week, and I've recorded, or I'm going to record four of them. But talk about the love of building. Do you know who loves building? Well, I do, and my team at Lead Software loves building, especially Web3 stuff. Well, really only Web3 stuff. We have built cross-chain bridges. We have built index monitoring solutions, RWA derivatives. We've worked with a bunch of companies in the space. We really are good at what we do. So if you're trying to like hire and outsource for this sort of thing, building in Web3, give us a shot. Go on leadsoftware.com and check us out, and maybe book a call with me, and we can do a discovery sesh.